To Vbac or not to Vbac? That's the question. So one of my most frequently asked questions is all about my Vbac experience. I quite often get people message me and ask me basically to Vbac or not to Vbac, whether I would recommend it, whether I think it's the right thing to do, and kind of like my tips and advice, and like talk them through their concerns. Obviously it's a really like long answer. It's a completely unique experience to each individual, so yeah, I'm gonna try and kind of answer it as best I can in this video, and talk through the pros and cons and kind of like truths about a Vbac and things I wasn't expecting, and just kind of my honest opinion. So to give some background, in case this is your first ever video, I had a Vbac a year ago. Actually, it's almost exactly a year ago. My daughter's just had her first birthday, and that was after having a cesarean 16 months beforehand. So yeah, cesarean in November 2016 and a Vbac in March 2018. 16-month gap between both births. So my kind of first thing is that everyone always says to me that they're really worried that they're going to have a uterine rupture. Now, if I can go like a 16-month gap, and obviously I fell pregnant when I was 6 months postpartum and be fine, like I'm probably the person who's in the category of being high risk for uterine rupture. And when I went for my first Vbac like consultation appointment, they actually said like the risks of like a uterine rupture aren't that much higher than like a first time birth. This is like literally made up, but these are made up stats, but it was like, say it was like 10% of births could end up 10% of Vbacs could end up in uterine rupture. It was like 8% of like first time mums could end up in, so like the stats weren't that much higher. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I always thought that was like a given. So that's an important thing to say when it comes to a Vbac. Okay, right, I really struggle to say this without like, I always worry that I'm gonna like upset somebody or trigger somebody, but for me the driving force of having a Vbac was the like need to experience a like vaginal birth. Like for me that was like a really big deal. Like I really had it in my heart. I really wanted to experience vaginal birth, and for me, if I went through a Vbac, went all through the labour and it ended up in an emergency cesarean, then I would know in my heart that my body isn't made for vaginal birth, and I'd be okay about that. But because with Rory's birth there was always like if I did this then maybe that wouldn't have happened, and if I did that then maybe that would have happened, so I always felt like maybe I could have done more to prevent a cesarean from happening. So my Vbac was kind of like my, if it happens in a cesarean then it's obviously just me and I'm not made to do that, and that's okay, natural selection, da la la. Whilst if I did everything in my power and I achieved a Vbac, then I was getting kind of what I wanted. But that's kind of my main point. For me, having a vaginal birth, whether that's right or wrong, was a really big deal. It was a big thing for me and something that I desperately wanted to experience. If you are not in that camp and you're kind of not that bothered about however your baby's delivered and you want to have a Vbac for different reasons, then this video is kind of to sum up all those reasons and then help you make a more informed decision based on my Vbac. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is, in a very roundabout way, the only kind of thing where I would say you should go for a Vbac is if you really have a strong desire to have a vaginal birth. If you don't have that strong desire and you're not that bothered, then I would consider an elective cesarean, because I'll talk about it in a second. That took me ages to get to that. Basically that's my ramble, that's what I'm trying to get to. I feel bad saying that having a vaginal birth was a really big deal, because obviously everything cesarean wise that I'm trying to like pioneer for, and birth being birth and this, that and the other, I believe all of that. And having a cesarean, I know that it was like a big deal. Like my baby wasn't just entered in the world by me sneezing, like I still had to go through a lot. But I think I always felt robbed, because obviously I'd gone through a whole labour, and felt like I'd been cheated at the last minute, and I wish I just had a cesarean in the first place, basically. And I think that's how a lot of people feel. So for me it was important to have the vaginal birth experience, because that's what I'd set up in my heart. So yeah, but obviously there's lots of people that have like traumatic vaginal births and then have like amazing elective cesareans for their second babies. Like, I think whatever your experience is unique to you. That's the gist of what I'm trying to say to you, though. Obviously, if you have a strong desire to have a vaginal birth, then absolutely go for a VBAC, because you're not going to achieve that any other way unless you try for a VBAC. Okay, we got there in the end. So the first thing I want to talk about really is how no two births are the same. So when I talk about VBACs with people a lot of people say that they're really worried that lightning's going to strike twice and they're going to go through all the whole experience, and last minute whatever happened in their first birth that ended in a emergency cesarean is going to happen again, which was 100% my fear too. I was really worried that I was going to get all the way there and then the same thing was going to happen and I would have gone through all of that. So I was really adamant in my birth plan that if there were any significant things that suggested that was likely that history was repeating itself, that I would have a cesarean whilst I was still conscious enough to fully appreciate the experience. Because with my first birth, I'd been in labour for so long, or so tired, or so out of it, that I didn't really, I still don't really remember it. So that was important to me. However, in my birth with Ellen, my VBAC birth, things were going wrong and happening, and I asked multiple times for a cesarean, and I'm grateful now in hindsight because I got my VBAC birth, but they kept on chilling me out and convincing me that I was doing the right thing. But if you're really anxious and control is a big element for you, then I would really make it strict in your birth plan that you feel like you need to be the voice of that situation. So anyway, no two births are the same, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So a brief, very brief, as brief as I can make it, talk about my births. So Rory, my firstborn, was my hands are awful, really bad faked hand. Rory, my firstborn, was early. Ellen, my secondborn, was late. She was overdue. So we're already starting off on an uneven playing field. I'm already showing that births are completely different. They're both a boy and a girl, so that obviously that they started off different. So Rory was early. Labour started because my waters broke and then contractions happened a bit later on, and from my waters breaking it took 12 hours for me to get 1 centimetre dilated, despite all of the pain being quite strong. It was quite a significant pain, and it took 12 hours. So my waters broke at 7 AM and I went to the hospital at 6 PM to be told I was 1 centimetre dilated, and it took until I think 5 AM the next day for me to get to 4 centimetres dilated, where I was then allowed an epidural, and I took the epidural because I was so tired. And it was all progressing really slow. It was all incredibly intense and very painful. My contractions were always very close together, which is why I was so confused as to why I was only 1 centimetre. What else? I'm making sure I don't miss any details. And yeah, it was a very slow process. From my waters breaking to him being born, it was 39 hours. And he was in a malposition. The theory was that he was back to back, which is why it was so painful and intense. But basically, a baby should be born from this part of their head, and Rory was trying to come out from this part of his head. So obviously, if I pushed him too hard, then he was either going to hurt his head or his soft spot was going to get compromised. So it ended up in an emergency cesarean, and my waters are broken, so I was at a risk of infection, which I did eventually get an infection, but they just gave me a course of antibiotics, so it's fine. Ellen, my second labour, so I woke up at 3 AM, I was overdue, having contractions, and they were quite strong contractions, but I'd had loads of false scares, so I was a bit oh, I don't know if it is labour, but I think it is, but I don't know. Yeah. So that's how that all started, and then let me think about what I'm trying to say. yeah, so contractions start at 3 a.m. and then by 2 p.m, like I was managing everything really well, I was really calm, I was managing the pain well. By 2 p.m. my waters broke and then labour went really quick, and so at 4 p.m, so we're talking 12 hours later, I was in the hospital and I was 10 centimetres and I was told to push. I didn't go to hospital either until I was 10 centimetres by accident. Also for real, I was at hospital at 1 centimetre, so I was really disheartened. Also then it was like go time. And I managed to get her down far enough that she was born by an episiotomy and a forceps delivery, and the reason that she got stuck and had issues was because the cord was around her neck. So basically every time I pushed her down, the cord would then bring her up a little bit, so I'd like push her this much and the cord would bring her back. So it was a struggle basically, and like she wouldn't come up by herself with the cord because the placenta needed to, like, I don't really know. So yeah, those are my 2 birth stories. They're very, very different. They're completely different experiences, and yeah, lightning didn't strike twice. Obviously both my babies got stuck, so maybe like there's like a kink here where my body goes like, how can we hold on to you? So with my 3rd birth, I mean, I've learned a lot and I would know what to do. But lightning doesn't strike twice is basically the gist of my story, my very long-winded story. Yeah, it just doesn't. Some people, obviously the history repeats itself, it does happen, but don't let that be your fear. You learn a lot from your first birth, and like everything I learned from like my birth with Rory, I applied to Ellen, and I was much calmer, I was much more composed, I knew what to do, I knew how to progress labour quicker. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily strike twice, so rule that out of your thoughts because it doesn't need to be there. The next thing that I hear a lot about C-sections and why people want to try for a VBAC birth is because when their babies are born via Ceasarian, they don't feel that immense rush of love that you see in like One Every Minute and all the films and this, that and the other. So that happened to me with Rory. He was born after 39 hours. I was very tired. It was 10:21 p.m. and bearing in mind I'd been awake since 7 a.m. the day before, so I was exhausted. I'd had an epidural and then like a spinal block thing, I think, because my epidural had started to like leak out my back, so it wasn't like effective enough for us like a C-section. So yeah, I was pretty out of it. I wanted to throw up because of all the medication, and I'd reacted to, like, I think it's quite normal to want to throw up and like to shiver. I think that's like a reaction to the drugs. So yeah, when he was born, obviously I was pretty tired, and apparently according to Rich they brought him straight over, but I don't remember that at all, and I think that Rich might have got that wrong. But I remember hearing him cry, and the blue screen was up and I didn't see anything, but I remember being like really excited, like a first date, like oh my god, he's here, he's finally here. And then I had like all these visions in my birth plan, like I really wanted to do skin to skin. I would have this moment where they brought him out and he was like this big ugly alien and he was all hairless and covered in blood and mucus and crying and screaming, and he'd go on my chest and we'd have skin to skin, it'd be amazing. And obviously Rory had to be checked because I had an infection, so the likelihood would be that Rory would have an infection, which he didn't, so he had to go be checked. So when he was brought over, he had like a nappy on, and a towel and a hat, and they brought him over to Rich. And I remember thinking like, he's stunning, like he's stunning. He didn't look anything like I expected him to. I thought he would look how Ellen looked actually, like really dark skin and dark hair, because that's how Rich looks. And he came out this little pale, gorgeous like blonde thing. He was so beautiful. Like I was mostly surprised by like how he just didn't look how I expected. Yeah, it was stunning, but I didn't really feel much because I was just so out of it and I was tired and I was overwhelmed, and yeah, so I always felt like I was robbed of that like rush of love feeling because I'd had this C-section. So my VBAC, a big driver was to have a VBAC so I could get this like one every minute moment. And then when Ellen was born, obviously again it was quite a big intense moment. I just had an episiotomy and forceps delivery, and I was very conscious of the fact that I would need stitches. Yeah, like I literally couldn't get this out of my head. Like I was like, don't do it, because I don't. And I think I said to the doctor at one point like, oh, just don't worry about stitching it back up, it'll be alright. And he was like, it definitely won't. You're gonna need some stitches. So yeah, I was really nervous about the stitches because I think somebody told me as well like before that the stitches was like the worst part, so I just had that in my head and probably made it worse than it was, like by just like being too nervous, because they gave you gas and air and stuff, and I'm pretty sure they inject you like numbing pain down there. So they put her on me, and obviously again, like, I just had a forceps delivery, and that is quite intense. And I remember like crying, like, I just want a C-section, and Rich saying, she's here, like, she's here, you don't need one because she's on you. And she was there, and she was covered in blood, and she was this big ugly alien, and she was put on me, and she was screaming, and she cried and she cried and she cried. And I remember thinking, like, get her off me, like, I can't, I've got to deal with whatever I need to deal with, like, I can't deal with her too. And for me it was really overwhelming, and I like said to Rich, you're gonna have to take her because I need to concentrate on having stitches and delivering the placenta and processing what the fuck just happened, because it was like quite like a lot happened very quickly with Ellen's delivery. Like, they, like, obviously the doctor came in and then they were trying to put I want to say a catheter, but it's not a catheter, a cannula in my arm, and they couldn't get it in, and 3 people tried, and obviously I'm trying to push whilst they're doing that. That was the most annoying thing for me ever. Like, why are you putting a cannula in my arm when I'm trying to get a baby out? And I was like quite distressed because I couldn't get the baby out, and with both births they give you like a 2-hour window in which to push, and then within that 2-hour window, like, if it's not going right, you can just tell by the shift in the energy of the room that everyone's getting a little bit like, and although they're like rewarding your pushes by telling you you're doing a good job, you can just tell that not much is happening. So I was getting distressed. So when Ellen was born, I just wanted to process what had happened, have my stitches, have a bloody drink, like, so I didn't want Ellen on me. And again, the same thing happened, like, I didn't get this rush of love for her. So the difference being, after Ellen's birth, I was hit by like adrenaline, and like, that was the Vbac. And like Rich said, if you left the room and came back in, I was sat there like I was like some kind of don. I was like smug as like anything, because I was really pleased with myself that I'd gone through quite a big birth. You know, Ellen's delivery was quite a lot to deal with, and I did it on gas and air, and I was like really impressed with myself. Like, I thought I was badass. So that was amazing. But when it comes to her specifically, with both babies, it took for me to be on the recovery ward by myself for me to feel what I needed to feel for them. And I think that that's actually really normal. Like, I don't think anybody, I think we put too much hype on this like big one born every minute moment, when actually we should just, I don't know, you just want to sleep after you give birth. So don't stress if that doesn't happen, and if that's your driving force for a VBAC, then it might be worth considering an elective cesarean, because like I said, it's not a given this whole moment. Like, maybe like you're like me and you in that moment just don't gel, like, or it's too much, you know, it's a lot to process, this whole new human being. So, and I think with like elective cesareans, like now as well, you can make them like amazing experiences where you can like play your own playlist, and you can I don't know, drop the cover and have clear covers, or you can do like natural gentle cesareans and stuff. Like, I know there's loads of ways. That was so pointless, that ponytail. There's loads of ways to make it a really lovely experience. So yeah, that's my honest kind of thoughts on that. If that's like your driving force to have a VBAC, then maybe reconsider. And then my next thing that I hear a lot as to why people want a VBAC, which I do get, and this, although I told everybody this is the reason I want to be back, it really wasn't. It's because I wanted a vaginal birth. But the recovery. So the recovery, you do recover better. It's a massive novelty. Like, I remember when Ellen was born, and then like Rich left me like an hour later because it's late at night, and the midwife was like, do you want a shower? I was like, yes, I want a shower. Like, I can have one now. That, yeah. Also, Rory, obviously I had to wait like 24 hours to have a shower. So I started feeling gross, like in my own blood. So then when they're like, oh, we'll get you some toast and you have a shower, I was like, oh my god, yeah. And they like took her, and I had this shower, and I like really like made the most of it. Whilst with Rory's shower, I could like, you know, that's another thing with the shower with Rory, I couldn't like, oh god, this is so stressful. They didn't have like a shelf to put your like shampoo and stuff on, so I had to put like my shampoo on the floor. And obviously when you've had a cesarean, like, I guess you had a cesarean because you're watching this video, by the way, you can't bend down. So I was like, every time I need to get my shampoo, I was like, and like I couldn't get it. So I had to like, I can't even remember what I did, but it was really stressful. It was like the most stressful shower ever. And obviously I couldn't like bend down to get my towel. I couldn't dry myself properly because of this whopping great scar. So yeah, that was really lovely. Like having a shower was like a major novelty. Then they still like wheel you down to recovery ward, and then in recovery ward I like almost went into like hospitalised mode, like, and it came back to me like the cesarean, because I was like, where's my buzzer, because like if I need anything you're gonna have to go get it for me. And they're like, no, you can, like, they didn't say it like this, but like, you can get it yourself, like don't forget you can get up. I was like, oh yeah, I can get up. And like you can take yourself to the toilet and stuff. Obviously you don't have like a catheter in, and so that was amazing. And just being able to get up and be mobile the next day was really great. And getting in the back of the car to sit with the baby was lovely. Whilst obviously like with Rory I had to sit in the front, and like every bump and lump in the road I was like, oh god, my guts are gonna fall out. So that was lovely. However, the thing that shocked me the most was that with the VBAC I was expecting to like hop, skip and jump out the hospital and be done with it, just be like, see ya, I'm done. Like, whilst obviously birth is birth, labour is still a labour, and you're not quite right afterwards. So I remember the next day, like, because I hadn't like obviously pushed as hard with Rory as I had with Ellen, like my whole body just ached, and my jaw, like, oh my god, where I'd been like biting down on gas and air, my whole jaw was like agony. My arms from like just grabbing the bed to push down, like, yeah, I felt like I'd like done the most intense gym workout ever. And then obviously in episiotomy, stitches, all of those things are still a recovery. So sitting down was painful. I still had to take pain relief, I think, for about 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. I couldn't walk very far. If I went for a big walk I would like basically feel like my tooth was about to drop out, and my stitches felt really tight. So as much as like I thought I would bounce back a lot quicker, and I did, there's still a recovery there, and you're not supposed to pick up your toddler with an episiotomy. I didn't know this until my friend like literally told me today. But you're still not supposed to pick up your toddler. So again, if that's your driver, like birth can still happen, like it can still go wrong. So my recovery with Rory was much more painful, but for a shorter period of time. Whilst with Ellen it was much less painful. Like by bedtime I was still pretty upset, like the pain had kind of really sunk in, I was struggling, and getting in and out of bed was still a bit of a struggle because obviously like my bits were stitched up. But it wasn't like, so with Rory I remember like crying one night because I couldn't like even go into his Moses basket to like get him. I just couldn't move, and like with Rory he used to like whinge a lot in the night and spit his dummy out, and I couldn't like even get his dummy. Like I remember just feeling so useless. And we bought a Chico next to me, that helped. That's like a big thing. If you're gonna have a cesarean, get one of those. What was I saying? I've lost my train of thought. So yeah, so the recovery isn't like, it's better, but there's still a recovery. So yeah, that's worth considering, basically, is my point. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this video up because it's been going on for ages, but I hope it helped. I hope it offered some insight into like a VBAC birth. But yeah, basically the synopsis of the video is if you're desperate for a vaginal birth and that experience, then you obviously go for a VBAC. If your driving force is more towards the recovery and more towards the bond I would say, like, do your thing, like, to make a cesarean work for you. Try a VBAC if that's what you really want to do, but just expect that it might not always go that way, and just like lower your expectations of yourself. Like, you don't have to put so much pressure on that moment. And then when it comes to the recovery, maybe put things in place to make sure you're going to have a lot of support afterwards, and consider, I don't know, I can't tell you what to do. I just wanted to offer you up my advice and my thoughts and my experience to help you make a more informed decision about what's right for you. So I hope that helped. If it did, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know if you want to see like a VBAC tips video, because that's on my list. But let me know if you want to see, leave a comment and let me know. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.